The Competition Commission's Health Market Inquiry has found that there is a lack of competition in the private healthcare sector and that it is a market characterized by high and rising costs of medical scheme cover as well as disempowering consumers. The Commission released its findings in Johannesburg today. The Commission initiated the inquiry because it had reason to believe that there are features of the sector that prevent, distort or restrict competition. The inquiry further found that doctors are incentivized to overservice, which includes increased admissions to hospital, increased length of stay than can be explained by the disease burden of the population. Well, earlier I spoke to my colleague Diabosito, who gave us this report.
The Competition Commission's health inquiry recommendations as well as findings have given us a bad picture, if you may put it that way, about the high concentration levels within the health sector group, the private health sector group. That is, we've heard about how there are just only 22 medical aid schemes that are held by over 70% of the market. Your Discovery market holds about 55% of that, based on the number of their beneficiaries, that is, of course. And of course, the hospital groups, we know that there's only three very large ones, which are Netcare, Mediclinic and Live Healthcare, which account for around 83%, which confirms 83% of the market share. That confirms to us about the dominance in the market and how that also impacts on competition and pricing. We know that there's been an outcry about the cost of private healthcare and in medical fraternities. But I have with me the Minister of Health, Dr. Motsoaledi, who joined us earlier today to find out what his views are about this inquiry. Minister, thank you very much for your time. This, of course, tells us that the picture is bad, particularly for the middle income group, which relies on private health medical services as opposed to public health medical services. We're paying basically more, and more could have been done to lessen the cost.
Well, this is what we've been saying. How did this commission come into being? Is because in 2009 I've complained bitterly about that the costs are escalating, people are not going to afford them. Now today's report is just confirming exactly what we've been complaining about. That yes, the costs are exorbitant. Remember that during the hearings there were two presentations from the World Health Organization and from the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which said, according to their findings, only 10% of South Africa's population can afford what is being charged in private health care. So more or less today, the findings which have been released are actually confirming all those concerns.
Having said that, if I were to go or someone had to go to a public health system also, they would complain not necessarily about price, but the efficiencies and services, which means that there is also scope for improvement on that side. Do you perhaps see things like the National Health Insurance coming into being and perhaps making a public health care system much better?
Of course, and we have heard it clearly up front. Exactly that there are two problems that healthcare has to solve in the country in order for there to be quality healthcare services for all the citizens, regardless of their income. Those two issues is number one, the exorbitant cost of private healthcare, which people have been denying. The judge has proved it today that is indeed true. The second one is the poor quality and lack of efficiency in public health care, which everybody has been talking about. And we are saying these are twins. We need to resolve them together. If you look at the NHI bill, we are proposing that these two problems must be solved together. The problem was that a number of people were denying the existence of the other problem, which is the high cost of health care. And we believe today that argument has been buried. The question is, how are we going to lower it?
What becomes then your role as a department? Because at the end of the day, it is the consumer that needs to get proper medical services, whether they go to the private healthcare or whether they go to the public healthcare. What becomes your role as a ministry?
You're precisely right. Our role is to make sure that both services, whether it's public or private, are available to all the citizens, regardless of their socio-economic background or their income, which is not the case at the moment. And we believe the only way to do that is the National Health Insurance Fund, which will be controlled central, which will purchase services for everybody, for all the citizens, either from the private and the public sector, depending on which one is available at time and which one is of good quality and which one is affordable. That's basically my role. And that's why we released those two bills, the National Health Insurance Bill and the Medical Schemes Amendment Bill. We released them for those purposes. And today now, this third entrant is to show that, yes, the minister has been telling the truth when he said private healthcare is exorbitant and we need to do something about it.
And then just lastly, Minister, your critics, there are those obviously who are opposing the national health insurance and its existence. How do we convince people across the country that this is what you, as you say, is what is best for South Africans? Well,
there are people who will oppose it. And remember, national health insurance is universal health coverage. We're not the first country to start with universal health coverage. Norway started in 1912. The UK in 1948, Japan in 1967, 61, Mexico in 2001, etc., etc. In all of those countries, there have been people who have been opposing. So it's not new for South Africa. There've always been opposition to this type of thing because when it comes, people don't understand it. So they start by opposing, but eventually they agreed. For instance, take the NHS in Britain. It's 70 years old. Yes, every year is reviewed because there are people who keep on saying, no, it's not working. They review it, but the British finally decides to keep it. Whether it is the Conservative Party or Labour Party that comes into power, after reviewing it because people complain that it's not working, they said, no, this is the best system after all. So we were expecting this opposition in South Africa. Is that we didn't expect it. It has been there, including the threat which some people are doing, like holding a toy gun on our faces and say we are going to leave if you do this. We know very well that those happens in other countries, and so we are not an exception in South Africa.
And just lastly, where is the process right now of the NHI?
Well, the process is that we have released the NHI bill. It's out for public participation for 3 months. They will give the inputs and will incorporate them in, and we'll send it to Parliament to start the process of enacting an act.